Well, you know, it's been some really tough conditions so far this early growing season, getting planted, getting into the fields. We've had some signs, positive signs over the last couple weeks in some areas, not perfect. Other areas it's gotten a little bit worse. So we're not out of the woods, even though there's been a bit of improvement. And the improvement here that I wanted to point out is some areas that have been quite wet have received only modest amounts of rain. Now, I do say modest amounts because it's not like there hasn't been any rain, but at least it's been light amounts of rain over good parts of Iowa. Now, on the other hand, the western Corn Belt, Nebraska and Kansas, have still struggled with getting any dry weather, and we still had a widespread up to 2 inches of rain, generally about a half inch to an inch over the western Corn Belt. And now more recently, the parts of the eastern Corn Belt have really got busy with heavy rainfall, or at least modest rainfall. Look at Indiana and parts of Ohio, half inch of rain up to 2 inches. So, you know, we're seeing more scattered precipitation here. If you look at the what you can see here is more scattered. It's not widespread necessarily, the 2 inch amounts, but scattered. So again, it's sort of complex here. Some areas have seen an improvement and probably making some progress. Other areas starting to get not as good conditions, and I think that's going to be the story this week. The eastern Corn Belt now is going to have its share of having some problems, and we can see that in the last 2 weeks here, maybe even a little bit better here. These areas in blue are areas of under a half inch of rain, so there's probably been some times that we've had some enhanced field work opportunities. But look at Nebraska and Kansas, not good at all, and now we're starting to get parts of the eastern Corn Belt quite wet as well. Now, dew points are into the 60s over much of the area, and keep in mind that when dew points get into the 60s, air can hold more moisture, and that gives us that potential for some heavier precipitation. Temperatures last week were modest, fairly close to normal, either a little bit above, that's yellow, or a little bit below, that's green. So at least temperatures, we haven't seen extremes. We went through that cool spell, so once we dried out, we had cooler temperatures. We really need that warm and dry weather, and I don't necessarily see that right now. Okay, so look at soil moisture here. One of the differences, if you remember a couple weeks, we had a lot more blue. So we are seeing some improvement of soil moisture. The areas that are really saturated and soggy are becoming a little bit more scattered, mainly the western Corn Belt and parts of the northern Corn Belt. But in the middle here, we've seen some improvement. But it's really scattered. So definitely we have some problems here, and we need some dry weather. Now, I wanted to mention rivers here. Rivers are still out of their banks, but the Mississippi, at least through the middle Mississippi now, is falling. The eastern Corn Belt, because of the recent rain, we have quite a few rivers that have come up and near bankfull. As far as soil temperatures go, we have warmed into the 60s across almost the entire Corn Belt. And look at South Texas, where we have temperatures in the 80s, and I've been going to talk a little bit about how hot it's been down in that region. So what do we see here as we go forward to the forecast? Well, we're sort of transitioning again. We're transitioning from this cool pattern to a bit of a ridge of high pressure here. Now, the high pressure ridge, this is this area of high pressure down here. This is week 2. It's sort of pushing up into the western Corn Belt, not so much the east. So when we look at temperatures here, we start out with a lot of below normal temperatures. They start to sort of shift over to the west, but that real warm air is hesitant to push too far into the Corn Belt. So it doesn't look like we're going to have the warm side of the warm and dry. And to tell you the truth, I don't think we're going to have the dry side either. But we can see that this persistent cool air that really has not been what we wanted moderates a bit, and we work back to normal in week 2. So generally, and this is generally, week 1 cooler than normal a bit, week 2 averaging to near normal. Now, as far as precipitation goes, I think for parts of Iowa, it's going to be similar to what we've seen, where it's going to be less rain than in the past, but there'll still be some rain. You know, how long has it been since we've had the entire area with no precipitation? I can't even remember when we've had that. I don't think it's been at all this spring. So it looks like this week we're going to have the eastern Corn Belt is going to get several inches of rain, and it could be even locally 3 to 4 in a few spots. Right from Missouri, across Illinois, Indiana, and into Ohio. Very heavy rain. The heaviest rain will be centered in Oklahoma and Arkansas, so it looks like a very wet week. Now, I guess, again, like we had the last couple weeks, that's the negative news. The positive news is it looks like a bit less rain over Kansas and Nebraska, at least most of it. Now, southeast Kansas doesn't look good, but other areas, a bit less rain. Looking out here as far as some threats, well, we already have some flash flood warnings posted, watches and warnings posted for the eastern Corn Belt, potential for river flooding, and we also have that heavy rain right through the 20th, so it looks like a persistent pattern here. Daily chances of rain in the parts of the central into the eastern Corn Belt. Okay, 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14. Well, this is what I said in my jet stream analysis, that push of cooler air, below normal air, is pushing off to the west, 6 to 10 day, but this warm air just doesn't want to push too far into the middle part of the nation until week 2, and then it starts to push into the eastern Corn Belt. But it's, again, I just can't find good news. Here's the good news is that we get maybe a little bit warmer air. The not so good news is 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14, continued wet conditions, and now not so much the west, but the eastern Corn Belt. So we just can't find that persistently good weather. It's just going to be some areas better than last week, other areas worse. Okay, I wanted to mention maybe misery loves company in some respects. Take a look at the south part of Texas. We're looking at readings every day above 105 and heat index values almost off the chart above 115. So really hot and dry conditions here. So we have everything, and the agricultural interest in this region are struggling with that type of hot and dry. So overall, we're going to continue with vulnerabilities for spring planting. In some areas, we're going to have better conditions than we've seen, and it will allow for some planting. Other areas, especially the eastern Corn Belt, we have this risk of heavy rain and a chance of rain almost every day. Not just this week, but into next week as well. And it looks like not a good situation as far as field conditions. So that's the update. I know it's a very critical time this spring, so if you have any specific questions, you can reach me at john, at bluewateroutlook.com. Sometimes it's hard to answer everybody's question with such a, or answer all the things we're looking at here for such a wide area. So if you have anything specific, feel free to send me an email. I'd be glad to answer that. Have a great weekend. Take care.